Welcome to Picks with the Professor, the show where a real statistics professor and his friends give you sports betting tips. I am your host, Professor Sy. That's my actual job title and last name, which is part of the reason why the mathematical model that I've built to predict various sports outcomes is affectionately known as Sideline. You'll hear more about the model during the course of this episode, set to cover the 5 best college basketball games and an off-the-wall one scheduled to be played on Monday, January 30th, 2023. In case you're new here, check out the webpage on the banner. It's www.pickswiththeprofessor.com/new for some explanations and community rules. See the Google Sheet for Sidelines projections on every single game. The also has a graded pick on each and every game, but because there are no locks in gambling, those are parsed into 3 categories: loves, likes, and leans. It is A, B, and C grades. There are 2 different ways to get the picks, either via Patreon or Black Book Sports. Most just depends on what you're looking for. Hopefully you got a package that's built for your needs, whether that's early access to model projections, ad-free shows, instant access to picks, and or the Discord chat, which is the best place to get questions answered about these or other games. Don't forget that the results for all recommended picks, the ones in the show, the Model A grade plays, and the plays of the day, can be found on Black Book Sports and the Google Sheet. All those links are in the show description. But as always, take what you like and leave the rest. Lastly, please understand that good and bad variance will occur. So as much as we'd like to see we'll be profitable each and every day, that is an impossible reality for any gambler. Jake closed the week off there on the weekend. I did the show by myself, didn't go as well. I feel like we've been doing really well here the last couple of weeks. Closed last week down, kind of feeling that ups and downs of the new year. You know, things were going a little bit better earlier, a little bit down. Now it's like now we got to get back going on the up again, right?
Yeah. I mean, Saturday was a weird day for basketball in general. That was like the SEC Big 12 Challenge had some really weird results, and then nobody really saw Creighton coming out with a 17-point win. And then, I mean, Saturday was just wild. It was great for watching basketball. Incredible games to watch. Not great for a gambling standpoint because it was kind of wild.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point that the SEC Big 12 Challenge was a lot of fun in a lot of the games. You had a few that kind of went maybe more as expected, but there were a lot of outright upsets. And it wasn't just like the favorite won but didn't cover. You had a lot of times where you looked at the weaker
Looking at you,
team,
Alabama.
Yeah, the weaker team just straight up won. Whether they were home or road, it didn't really matter. And of course, you have the injury to Miles at TCU, and that that changed that game for sure. Like you said, the Alabama one, Baylor, hung on at least at home in a game that was a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit later. A little bit slower tempo than we expected. Auburn getting run out of the building and then finding their way back in the building. I mean, it was good to watch. But you're right, it was a lot of weird results, which. Hopefully, viewer, you were on the right side of some of those. Yes. I think I was on the wrong side of more than I was on the right side of. But again, that's the ups and downs of it. Hopefully, we'll start this week off strong here today. Yeah.
Like you said, Saturdays have been weird all year because what was it? A couple weeks ago when like 11 of the top 25 teams lost on that same day. It's just been
something like that.
Weird weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, before we get to this Monday slate, some reminders. Please hit that like button if you're on YouTube. Also, if you aren't yet, please consider subscribing or following. It's free. And if you turn on notifications, you'll miss any of the college basketball, MLB, or college football content that this channel provides. I've already mentioned the Patreon, but check it out if you haven't yet. Lots of great benefits we found over there above and beyond what we do here. $3 a month gets you the play of the day. For another $2 a month, you get all the model picks and access to the Discord chat group. And for $5 more a month, you get ad-free shows and immediate access to every recommended play. Go to www.patreon.com/pickswiththeprofessor for more details. But even if you're not there, we're still thrilled to have you here. Let's get to the games. Remember that we only use one book when making picks, but you should always shop around. Sign up link in the show description. Add a couple more books to your options. Jake, this is where I really miss IUPUI playing at like noon in a garbage game that we can all just have on. And I don't know if I would say enjoy, but watch, pay attention to, something to keep some interest in. It's obviously not a great basketball. I miss it. I feel like we should have that here today,
Yeah. I mean, I always love the announcers they put on those games too, because that always ends up fun. There's always somebody saying something wild on there that you're not quite expecting.
Exactly. Since there's no take, so we'll go right to the night slate here. 6 p.m. Central, Virginia at Syracuse. Virginia is a 4.5-point road favorite. We're going to take the over 132.5. Model says 132, but has really underestimated the number of points that both of these teams have scored. We did play the Syracuse over last week. I believe it was against North Carolina. That did not go over for us. But in general, both these teams have been much more higher scoring than anticipated. We talked a lot about Virginia this year. Their offense is actually better than their defense is. They still play really slow, which keeps their games lower scoring. But with as good of an offense as they have, the pace that Syracuse plays with, the fact that Syracuse has got a pretty good offense too and just doesn't play a lot of defense, this seems like a game that can sniff 140. May not can get there, but at least should flirt with 140. 132, I think, is a little bit too low, so we're going to go over that number. Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, like since 2023, really, Virginia's taking care of business. They're 6-1, winning most of them by about 7 points. For the first matchup here went 73-66, which would have been over this number. Both teams were hot from deep. I'm not exactly sure we'll see them hit almost 23s and 50%, but I think it'll be closer to that than way under it because both teams are really good shooting teams, and neither team is great at guarding the three-point arc. Both teams have very efficient offenses. They work very well. Syracuse defense is by far the worst unit here. Virginia has scored under 73 times in their last 7 games. So I don't think that Syracuse is going to get in that way. I think they're going to easily get the 70-75. Just need somewhere in the 60s, maybe even upper 50s, depending on how well Virginia plays to get over this number. I really don't see them stopping Syracuse from getting to at least 60 because they have a very good offense. Mm-hmm. It's just going to be a very good game, I think, but I just don't think Syracuse has the talent to hang with the top teams of the ACC this year.
They haven't quite got that win yet. They've been in so many games, and I think to me that's what makes this spread of 4.5 just to stay away. I've seen some 5s as well, just to stay away. Maybe if you get some more points. Part of me says taking Syracuse makes sense because they've lost a lot of close games, and they could lose another close game and still cover the number. But that theory was kind of what we were banking on over the weekend with Ohio State, who had lost a bunch of close games and they got run out of the building. So you just never know when a team who's just losing close just doesn't show up. So Syracuse is a little bit nerve-wracking the way Virginia's played. They've been playing so well, but it's scary to lay that many points on the road, again, against a team that's hung around. So it's I think it's a really well-priced spread, that 4.5, 5. But yeah, something like 70-65 seems pretty reasonable. That would get us 135 points. Like you said, it'll be hard for Syracuse to keep Virginia under 70. It's been done by teams with good defenses in conference play. Syracuse isn't one of those, and Syracuse has got a good enough offense and will hurry up enough against Virginia's pace, like you said, probably to get to the mid-60s. Should get us over this number again in what we think is a well-priced spread, but an opportunity to make money there on the over. Which takes us to the other 6 o'clock game we're going to cover here. I got our double dip for you here. North Carolina Central plus 5.5 at Norfolk State and grabbing the over 135.5. Bottom line on this one is this is an A-grade play for the model, which says this should be Norfolk -4 on average. Norfolk is probably the better team, but I'm not convinced by how much. And they're at home, but you don't give the same home court edge in this situation as you do in certain other situations. So if you're only given, say, 2.5, which I think is what I'm using here, for their home court, even if they're a point better, that makes them should be a 3.5 point favorite. 5.5 implies they're a lot better than North Carolina Central, and I think they're a little bit better, but not by much. Not so much that I'm convinced they're a lot better. And of course, anything can happen in one game. We always talk about that. Central could win by 10 or Norfolk could win by 15, and neither one of those results would be like the weirdest thing ever, especially what we just witnessed over the weekend. Again, hi, Alabama. But in general, NC Central got a good chance to hang around this game. They're talented enough. These are two of the better teams in the MEAC. Should be a good game. Getting 5.5 is a great investment opportunity. Going to go over the 139.5. Models is 144. We've overestimated Central totals, but underestimated Norfolk State totals. I think that balances out. You've got a NC Central team that's going to play with a little bit of pace and a Norfolk team that plays a little slower, but has a really good offense and a really bad defense. And that's a recipe for a lot of points. Doesn't really matter your pace if you're always scoring and always allowing points. You're going to go a little bit lower because of the pace, but the fact that your percentages of allowing points and scoring points goes up kind of balances it out. We think this can get to at least an average number of points in college basketball, which is 140. It's going to go over and grab the road dog. Jake, lots to cover on this one. What do you got?
Yeah, the over is my favorite play in this one. like you said, Norfolk State, terrible defense, but they actually rank in the top 100 in effective field goal percentage, offensive rebound percentage, and 2-point percentage. They're a very good free throw shooting team that gets to the line a lot. They don't really care for the 3-point arc. Don't shoot it well. Don't shoot a lot of them. But their defense is just so bad. Then North Carolina Central is a very average defense. And if you take out the turnovers, which happens a quarter of their possessions, it's hard to say to take that out. But on the other 3/4 of their possessions, they actually have a very efficient offense. They just don't like to hold on to the ball. So if they can solve that a little bit, they should hang in this game because they've got their offense is good, their defense is pretty good. They're a good 3-point shooting team. If they get to take the shots, they typically go in. And their Norfolk State's defense is just garbage. Both teams should very easily get in the 70s. I think it's a very tight game. I think the free throws are going to be big. Maybe a couple late turnovers gives the game to Norfolk State, but I think it's going to stay close. 5.5 is a good number, and over 140 or 139.5 I really like.
Yeah, Sideline says 74-70 is the average score here. And like you said, both teams get in the 70s. It makes a lot of sense. I think the fact that NC Central turns the ball over a lot, Norfolk State, not really the defense to take advantage of that, not really the one to cause those turnovers with being a bad defense. So that actually plays into North Carolina Central's strengths or makes their weakness more, less of a weakness, I guess I would say. I would say what makes it strength, makes it less of a weakness. What I will say, I'll comment because I don't know how many more times we're going to get to talk about Norfolk State, but if they happen to win the MEAC, I would say keep an eye out for them in the tournament. If they win their opening night game and go up against a 1 seed that plays with any tempo, I feel like it's an automatic overplay because they don't play that fast, but going up against a team, I'm thinking of a Gonzaga pace, of a Kansas pace, of a TCU pace, Alabama. There's a lot of Baylor, right? And I don't know, some of those teams won't be 1 seeds. I get that. I'm just saying, in those top teams like that, whoever turns out, if it is a team that plays with any pace, Norfolk is going to get drugged into that pace game, going to give up a ton of points because they have no defense, but they got a good enough offense, like you said, they're going to score too. Yeah. So if they do end up making the tournament, getting in there, I feel like that's a little nugget to drop there that the over makes a lot of sense there because in the MEAC, they can at least slow it down a little bit on occasion, but to get to the tournament, they're not going to be able to because they just want the talent. But they will score. They'll score here, but again, we think that Central can score with them. So over and grabbing the points there is the play in that one. Also, smaller school action, 7 p.m. Central, South Dakota State at UMKC. You're going to grab the 1.5 with South Dakota State. I think South Dakota State wins this outright. According to the model, they win it 51% of the time, so more likely to win than lose. Getting a 1.5. I see at some shops it's a +2. You'll know how I feel about 2. You get that push protection on one of the more common endings. Or taking the kind of even money +105 type on the money line. Makes a lot of sense here. I think they're the better offense. I think they're the better defense. I think they can go on the road and win. UMKC is not a bad team, but I just think South Dakota State's a better team. So, just give me the better team, even though they're on the road. I don't want to lay points with them, but being the underdog, they're the better team. And so I'm going to roll with South Dakota State. Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, this UMKC is they're a decent team, but they have a very weak offense for where they rank. I mean, they are struggling to find open shots. They turn the ball over. They're near one of the worst 3-point shooting teams, and they're not much better from inside the arc. They clean up their misses, so that's good because there's a lot of them.
They got a lot of them,
yeah. They don't share the ball a lot either, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they're missing so many shots. So, it's not that their players are selfish. I just don't think they're completing the assist. They tend to foul a lot and give up a fair amount of offensive rebounds too. Their pace, I think, is going to kind of hurt them in this one, limiting the possessions. I think it's going to keep this game tighter. South Dakota State has a pretty efficient offense. It is a top 5 free throw shooting team. So if you add in the way UMKC likes to foul, that should give South Dakota State enough time, really, and extra possessions to score. They do a great on the defensive end. They're not so much forcing turnovers or anything, doing well, but they do a good job of keeping their opponents off the free throw line, and that's going to take one of the bigger streets from Kansas City away. So I think this game stays real tight, getting a 1.5 here. I think they have a good shot at winning this one too.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll take us to our 8 p.m. slot. Baylor at Texas. Kind of teased this in the intro. We went over in Baylor, Arkansas, and I really like that play. Arkansas decided, maybe wisely, that they were going to really try to slow that game down. They finished well under their average number of shots. I think 5 shots under their average, which is a pretty decent mark. I think that is why the game went under. Arkansas deciding they didn't want to get a track meet with Baylor. With Baylor's offense, that kind of makes sense. Texas, on the other hand, I don't think that's the way they're going to play. They haven't done it all year for the most part. They've just decided they want to go fast. They'll try to get you into that game. Baylor's happy to play that game. I think both these teams are going to go up and down the court. We're going to go over 150.5 in this one. The model says 150, but has still been underestimated, even despite Baylor going under in that last game, still been underestimating on average number of points both these teams have scored. So I still think this is one of those that when you got these two pretty dang good offenses and two okay defenses, not bad, right? But not anywhere near the level of these offenses. And you've got a Baylor team that's playing fast and a Texas team that's been playing even faster. When they have the opportunity, they want to go even faster on this one. I just think there's going to be points upon points upon points on this one. So I'm going to go over 150.5. With the rest of the side, Texas is 2.5, maybe up to 3-point favorite. The model says 4. I think it's a stay away. I have no idea what to expect from this one. Both teams have been playing pretty well for the most part, but coming off of slightly disappointing weekends, Baylor, the players, you have to assume are happy with the win. But given the way they trailed most of the game, you were a little disappointed in that effort, especially if you backed them. They never sniffed the cover. And of course, Texas never sniffed anything in that Tennessee game as we predicted there. So a little bit of a disappointing showing for these two teams, despite how good the Big 12 looked. These are two of the more disappointing teams in it. So I don't really know what to expect. Texas at home, they've done well there, but I can easily see they've won a lot of close games. I could see them beating Baylor by 1 or 2. Baylor's hung around, and lately, early on, Baylor lost all those close games. Lately, Baylor's been winning all the close games. If it's a close game and you're getting 2.5, 3 with Baylor, you're probably okay. But I mean, you never really know at the end of the games. And that's that end of game variance, right? It could be a close game after 39 minutes, and depending on that last minute who the heck knows, right? So I just don't think there's a great investment opportunity on the side. I think it's pretty well priced. I think the over is the way to focus on this one. Jake, what do you have for us?
Yeah, the over is the smart play. If I was going to pick a side, I'd lean Baylor and take the points because I think it's a tight game. But both these teams have elite offenses. I mean, Texas just on the Tennessee team that plays probably the best defense in college ball right now, and it's averaging like 58, leading up 58. They put up 71. It's pretty impressive to be that far over that number. Baylor's offense has been really taking it to the Big 12 this year. Scoring.
To be fair, they also gave up like about 100 points. It seemed like to a Tennessee team that likes to score about 60 on average, right?
Yeah, I didn't say Texas had a good defense. In their offense, but I mean, like Baylor taking it to most of the Big 12, scoring less than 70 twice. The pace of this game is going to be a track meet because that's how these teams want to play, and both teams like to put that offensive pressure on you rather than defensive pressure. Make sure you can score with them versus trying to limit you from scoring.
And it's interesting. I'm watching a lot of Big 12. Both these offenses, they don't play at that reckless pace where they're just like, it's not like that 7 seconds or less offense where they're trying to get up a shot, but they get down in a reasonable amount of time and they've got a lot of ball. They're not slow setting stuff up. I mean, they're going to go. And if they're going to get a good shot in 8 seconds, they're going to take it. If it takes 12 seconds, they're going to take it. They move. They don't dilly dally around. And that's what we mean too by when Jake and I both talk about how the pace of this game should be there. It's not so much as you're going to see constant fast breaks chaos, but what you're going to see is the other team get the ball down the court, look for a good shot, and they're going to take good shots earlier in the shot clock. So you're just not going to have as many of those just 25 seconds of nothing happening.
Well, like what was that? The last Big 12 Baylor game was in. They just kept running the same play to Flagler in the corner over and over, and nobody could figure it out. Like, yeah, they're going to find that weak spot in which you can't guard, both these teams, and just absolutely pound it and make it change something.
Because Baylor's offense is rising to the top of the NCAA, and Texas is not far behind it. I mean, these are two really good offenses.
Yeah, defenses are just going to have a hard time in this game. They're at a disadvantage everywhere they look. Both teams like to force a lot of turnovers. Texas likes to hold on to the ball a little bit better than Baylor, and that might be the difference in who wins and who loses. Because Baylor can get a little sloppy, but I think a lot of that, their metrics and stuff haven't come up to where they're at now, because I think a lot of that was at the beginning of the year. But Baylor has the better rebounding, and Tennessee took advantage of that on Texas, and I think that's going to help. Both these teams can really get hot in a hurry. They can really go on a 10, 12, 15-point run on you before you blink. I think we see a couple of those where it's just lightning fast shots where it's 20 points in a 4-minute spread or something like that. And this game gets up real close to the 80s, if not high upper 70s to low 80s kind of game.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And you make a good point there. I talked a lot about Baylor as a Baylor alum, watching this team more. Early on, they just really lacked an identity. They had games where they looked like they wanted to be a defensive team and they were trying to slow it down, and they had games where they're going fast. They just didn't really know what they were doing. They found that identity now, and that identity is, for the most part, we want to move. We don't want to lollygag. We're going to be great on offense, and if that makes us suffer a little bit on defense, so be it. And that's kind of where Texas is kind of morphed into as well. And so that kind of sets up for a more higher scoring game, we think, than the odds makers do. So over 150.5 is the play there. The other Big 12 game at 8 p.m. Central, Iowa State at Texas Tech. It's a pick 'em right now. We're going to go on Iowa State. I think it's minus 105 odds. Texas Tech with a good road win at LSU. I don't know. I kind of think that maybe says more about LSU than anything else, to be honest. I still think Tech might be one of the weaker teams in the Big 12. What I would have said is how much of a good home court advantage they have, but we've seen a lot of teams, every team, seemingly go into Lubbock and get the win. And, I think Iowa State can do it as well. Iowa State let us down this weekend. Missouri just was unconscious from three. And maybe that happens to Tech. You just never know, but we don't expect that sort of performance. We always talk about 30 games or so in a season. 5 are going to look great, 5 are going to look bad. It kind of works the same way about 5. Your opponent's going to look great, 5 your opponent's going to look bad too. And that's just one of those where they just ran into a Missouri team that was just on fire. You should have never predicted that. If you predicted that Missouri would shoot that well from 3, everybody looked at you crazy and said, what are you basing that off of? Like, it was possible. Nobody would ever say it wasn't possible, but it wouldn't be what we expect to happen. And so to me, that's kind of why Iowa State let us down. I still think they're a really good team. I still think they're undervalued. I still want to back them here. I think they, like Baylor and Kansas and many other teams, can go into Lubbock. I don't think they're going to blow them out in Lubbock, but I think they can go on the road and get the win. So we're going to back the Cyclones here. Total on this one's 130.5. The model would lean over and says 132. I probably would go over 2 if I had to, but I think just focusing on the Cyclones here is the best bet. Jake, what do you got?
Yeah, Cyclones all the way. I'm not exactly sure why this isn't them minus like 1 or 2. 2 probably being where I would have put it, but this game is on the turnovers, right? Texas Tech struggling to not turn the ball over like 20% of the time, or maybe a little more. They're turning the ball over, and it's not going well for them in Big 12 play. And you've got the number 1 team in the nation at forcing turnovers coming to town, who does it at 27.5% of their opponent's possessions, and even turnovers. I mean, they're 4th in steal percentage, 1st in non-steal turnover percentage. I just don't see where Texas Tech's offense is going to be enough to get them a win in this game, especially since you're not adding points for them. I mean, the slow pace and the free throw percentage can maybe come back to bite Iowa State, but this game really is simple and hard at the same time, right? It's all in the turnovers, because that's where this game is going to turn. And I just don't think Texas Tech's got the offense or the defense to give them enough extra possessions for the ones they give away, or the offense to take advantage of their possessions they don't give it away on. I think Iowa State wins this one by a handful of points.
Yeah, and Iowa State won the first game of this series in Ames 84-50. And you don't, when you have the rematch, right, there's a lot of, we've already talked about a handful, because now we're getting to the point where we're starting to see some more rematches, right? You can't just say the same thing will happen, and you can't just say the flip will happen. A couple of weeks ago, we had a great example of Michigan, Maryland. The flip happened on the rematch. We had one, even I think the next day, with Villanova St. John's, and the same thing happened. And you got to look at why it happened and what's going on, and dive a little bit deeper to try to get a good feel for this. And I think you made a good point there that Tech struggles play right into Iowa State's strengths. Now, Iowa State was really hot that day. Don't expect them to go on the road here and win by 34. They can, I guess. They already did once, but that seems unlikely to happen again. But we still think that what we saw there with regards to a team being able to capitalize, their strengths versus the other team's weakness, is the same thing that we'll see here. And Iowa State is just built to beat a team like Tech. Again, Tech has lost in normal seasons. Even when Tech hasn't been good, they've been able to get home wins. They will probably get one eventually, but Iowa State doesn't seem like the team that's going to happen to unless they just go completely cold, which, again, you never know if that sort of thing happens. But if Iowa State plays a normal game, they should be able to get the win in Lubbock, again, like all the other Big 12 teams that have come in there have, including a team like West Virginia, who's not as good. We don't see any difference there. So I think you make a good point, right? Why is this not Iowa State like -2, maybe even -3? I think it might be a little bit of an overreaction this last weekend, right? Missouri looked fantastic. Tech gets the win at LSU. I just don't think I make that much of that. I think we have a lot of other data that kind of trumps that last game out thing, and I don't want to overreact to that. So I'm like you. I'm all the way Cyclones here on this one.
Yeah. I think, especially coming off a loss like that, Iowa State's going to be a little extra motivated because they got embarrassed in a national TV spotlight game, and I would be itching to get back out there to prove that I'm not that team. So I'm sure they're all that way.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the few Big 12 teams to lose in that challenge, and not just lose, but the way they lost. Them in Texas, right? Just the way those teams lost. Not what you're hoping for. Yeah. To the overtime slot, an off the wall game here. 7 p.m. Central, Alabama State at Florida A&M. The SWAC has been really good to us for the most part this year. The model's got a couple of A-grade plays on some SWAC games, so check that out if you're not already with us on Patreon over on Black Book. Again, the link's in the show description for that if you want to get those model A-grade plays. This is a B-grade play, Alabama State -1.5, but Jake and I think that it is still worth an investment even though it doesn't quite get to A grade status. The model wants -1 for an A grade, but again, 1 isn't that likely to happen. So you're not adding a lot of extra probability there. If you're going from 1.5 to 1, the biggest jump is at 2. Florida A&M is really, really bad. I mean, that's the whole handicap here, right? They're at home, but they are really, really bad. Alabama State's not great, but good enough to go on the road and get the victory. Alabama State has 6 wins in the season. Florida A&M only has 3. And that's the type of thing that they've played relatively comparable schedules that you look at and you say, Alabama State's just good enough to beat these teams. That's why they have 6 wins. If they weren't that good, they'd also have 3 wins, right? So they're just good enough, though, to go on the road and get this done. I wouldn't want to lay a big number, but laying 1.5 makes a lot of sense. Jake, can you name anything about these schools other than stats you just looked up? Can you name a mascot? Do you know either mascot?
Is State like the Hornets or something like that?
I think that's right. I think Florida A&M
is a Panther.
I was going to say they're the Rattlers. I don't know.
No, I think you're right with the Rattlers. I think you're right.
All right.
I think Panthers like the FAU or something like that.
I think that's the extent of our knowledge on these teams, other than stuff we just looked up, right?
Yes. Everything I'm about to say is what I've just looked at.
There you
go. Florida A&M. They've got their 3 wins. 2 of them are against D2 schools, and one of those went to overtime. So they're just not good at anything. They're slow. They have the next to worst.
Very slow paced. Yeah.
They don't like open shots. They turn the ball over way too much. They shoot a 3 ball at just slightly below average, I guess is the best thing you can say about them. Yeah. They on defensive end, nothing else is pretty. They give up way too many open shots. They let you clean up your misses. So if you happen to miss that open shot, you're getting another chance. They foul a lot. There's nothing good about this team. The fact their 1 D1 win is against Mississippi Valley State. That's at home, and it was a 1-point win. That tells you the level of ball they play at. Alabama State at least has some good spots. They're a very good free throw shooting team. They don't turn the ball over and crap ton. They're less than Texas Tech, and they rebound their misses. So at least they have some second chance opportunities, extra possessions. They should win this by a handful of points. Please don't watch this game. Just bet it and then forget that it happens. Wake up the next morning like, oh, yeah, I hit that one too.
You probably can watch it. A lot of these SWAC and the MEAC games, I've been having luck with finding them on YouTube. They've been streamed there. And a lot of times what happened is there's a camera on the scoreboard, and that's how you have to look at the scores. You do what you got to do when there's nothing happening, right? But you're right, this is going to be really rough basketball. But I think the key point to summarize this game and why we think this is a good investment opportunity here is we talk about it more with football, because in college football we do bet on the bottom teams much more frequently. There are good opportunities to invest on those bottom teams. And sometimes those bottom teams turn out to make bowl games, right? We saw that this most recent season, they get to 6 wins because they're playing a bunch of other bottom teams. And we always talk about how at the top and at the bottom, especially in college football, you tend to see the outliers just really diverge and really just either fall off the cliff or really just go up the mountain. And that's the same thing that happens at the bottom in college basketball. It's not happening at the top in college basketball. I don't think, there's really a lot of that truly elite going up at the top college basketball. There's a lot of good teams, but it's hard to really figure out who the great teams are. Maybe that'll separate, but this isn't one of those seasons, right? I'm thinking a few years ago, the Baylor Gonzaga year where Baylor had just the 2 losses that was all kind of COVID related, I think, or maybe just 1 loss. I think Gonzaga was undefeated going. And those 2 were like by far, right, the better teams. You don't have that this year, but the bottom, it happens every year where the bottom 4, 7, whatever teams, they start really falling off there. And Florida A&M is potentially in that group of falling off. Yeah. And it's hard to know exactly how bad they are. They're just really, really bad teams. And we've seen of late a team like IUPUI, we've talked about them kind of rising up out of that and becoming a pretty competent team and covering a lot of these bigger numbers because they aren't in that very, very bottom falling off. And despite what you may see if you look at Ken Palm's ratings, IUPUI is not in that bottom hopeless tier with the way they've been playing as of late. But Florida A&M very, very much could be in that tier. And Alabama State is not. And that, I think, is the key to Alabama State is good enough to handle one of those bottom outliery bad teams, even on the road, especially laying such a short number like this. Like you said, they should win by 4, 6, something like that. And Florida A&M's bad enough that if Alabama State runs away with this and pulls away in the second half, that wouldn't be the most shocking thing either, despite Alabama State being questionably good enough to even do that. This would be the team that they would be able to do it against.
Yeah, like just looking into it, the coach for Florida A&M, he's had 2 winning years his whole career as a D1 head coach, and those were in 2002 and 2003 with Western Michigan. There's a gap. He stopped coaching in 2007. I'm assuming he got fired from South Florida and then didn't pick up Florida A&M until 2018. But it's not looking
hasn't gone well.
He doesn't seem to make the right decisions in coaching here or at this level. I mean, it's got to be hard when the talent's that short at a Florida A&M school. He probably knows the game very well, but probably struggles in game. Just gets it off his record, but.
And to his credit, we always talk about if you're not a good team, you don't want to play fast because you want to minimize the possessions and create higher variance games. To his credit, he's doing that. He has a terrible offense and a terrible defense. And so you want to play slow because if you play fast and expose that, that's not good. So he's got that going for him at least. The problem is he still has a terrible offense and a terrible defense. And so that's why that's why we spent way too much time talking about this game, but why we're on Alabama State -1.5 there in our off-the-wall overtime game. Jake, that's all we've got for the viewer there. Do you have any parting words for us?
Look, I'm very sad that was the last Big 12 SEC challenge because that was a lot of fun every year, even though the SEC gets a little bit of the short end of the stick considering which teams we get to send. Because, sending out LSU was not great. But, whatever. We'll get the ACC next year.
All right. Well, there you go. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Picks with the Professor. Don't forget to subscribe so you can enjoy all the sports betting content we've run on this channel is dropped right into your feed. I'll be back again tomorrow with more college basketball betting content. And until then, as always, best of luck. And remember, you can get your betting money, but please don't bet your eating money.